Hello and welcome to another episode of Adventures in Angular. And today we're talking with a very, very special man. But before that, let's meet and say hello to our panelists for this episode. Today we have Charles Maxwell.
Hey everybody. It's weird to not be, anyway.
Joe Eames.
Hey everybody. And this isn't weird at all.
Alyssa Nicoll. Hey everybody. and today's guest is Andrew Evans from the very popular blog, Medium group Angular in Depth. And so Andrew, do you mind sharing a few? Oh, by the way, I'm Shai Resnick and I'm super sick. That's why my voice sounds so romantic. I'm Shai Resnick from highres.io. So let's start the episode.
This episode is sponsored by Sentry.io. Recently, I came across a great tool for tracking and monitoring problems in my apps. Then I asked them if they wanted to sponsor the show and allow me to share my experience with you. Sentry provides a terrific interface for keeping track of what's going on with my app. It also tracks releases so I can tell if what I deployed makes things better or worse. They give you full stack traces and as much information as possible about the situation when the error occurred to help you track down the errors. Plus, one thing I love, you can customize the context provided by Sentry. So, if you're looking for specific information about the request, you can provide it. It automatically scrubs passwords and secure information, and you can customize the scrubbing as well. Finally, it has a user feedback system built in that you can use to get information from your users. Oh, and I also love that they support open source to the point where they actually open sourced Sentry if you want to self-host it. Use the code devchat at Sentry.io to get 2 months free on Sentry's small plan. That's code devchat at Sentry.io.
So, Chuck, I would let you do the talking because my voice is like this.
Sounds good. Yeah. So there's a Medium article. I guess it's Angular in Depth. I was like, oh, yeah, I know this one. You talked basically about, DevOps. I think that's a 4-letter word for developers or some developers.
Let's get to know Andrew before the post. Like, who are you, Andrew?
He's famous. Everybody knows Andrew.
Yeah, everybody
but there might be one or two people. So go ahead, Andrew.
No, for the people who don't know, I'm asking for the 3 people who don't know.
Yeah, that's good. We need to fill them in. So, so I'm Andrew Evans. I'm a software engineer. I work for Capital One here in Richmond, Virginia. I have been developing in software for, I guess, just about 8 years. I actually started as a designer. I worked for a government contractor in Newport News, Virginia, and went back and I got a master's in computer science and went and worked in their IT department for a while doing inventory management and essentially like connecting a lot of old systems to a lot of new stuff that they buy. And when I got to just about the senior level there, I realized that I didn't want to be a manager. And I actually also got married at the time. And so all these things happened and, I realized this was a good time to make a transition. So I looked at a lot of different places and Capital One, had the best offer and they gave me a lot of opportunities to work in DevOps, which is like what we're talking about today, but also about like cloud technologies and a lot of things that I wanted to grow on. And, it was a chance to learn a lot and to do a lot of cool stuff. So I came up here. And so ever since then, I've been there it'll be 2 years in June. And I've gotten into blogging originally just for like myself. And then I got to know Todd Palmer. He's one of the big contributors to Angular in Depth. He invited me to contribute. And that's like, obviously one of the reasons I'm here. But I love learning about technology, talking about technology and writing about technology. So that's pretty much me. And that's just about it. Where do we want to go from here?
Tell us where you were born. And
you want the whole life story? Yeah. So,
your social security number, your mother's maiden name.
Oh man, I forgot that. I gotta go look it up. Hold on. Yeah.
No. So what was the? So you wrote a Medium post, right? About how to deploy to Firebase, basically.
Right. That's right. Mm-hmm.
So can you give us just like a quick background to those of us, like the 3 people who haven't read the post?
Sure, absolutely. Firebase. Well, it started with some of the guys that I work with were telling me about Firebase, and they said that there was this cool new thing that was available that let you quickly, spin up cloud infrastructure and be able to do a lot of really cool stuff without a lot of work. And if you've ever done stuff like Jenkins or any of the kind of old school or older like pipeline technologies, you realize that like can be kind of a pain, especially when you get into like Terraform or any type of like scripting build. And so I kind of dove into Firebase just originally to playing with it. And then I just saw how like awesome it was. I mean, Firebase is like magic. Like there's a lot of things that you can do very quickly. They have a CLI that allows you to do everything from just regular like deployments, which is like what I'm talking about today. But you can also leverage Firebase functions, which are basically like almost kind of like Lambdas, and they integrate with like a database instance. And you can use they have like machine learning, and they have a lot of different functionalities that you can leverage pretty easily, and it's all free. I mean, it's within limits. When there's a certain, I forget the cap, but there's a certain limit that you can only have like 5 applications or something like that. And I actually exceeded that. And you can actually reach out directly to Google, and they'll open it up for you to have more if you're learning or doing something like that, which is what most of what I've done with Firebase. Now I've kind of gotten into the point where I'm like taking it a little bit more seriously, and I'm actually working on a side project that's actually going to be completely in Firebase. And it's a great platform to get up and running. And it's also a great platform for new people that aren't quite as familiar with like CI/CD or like any type of cloud deployment, to be able to quickly see it in action. And there's really not that large of a learning curve, which kind of makes it fun. On the flip side, CircleCI is also free. And it's also something that basically obfuscates a lot of the pain that you have with Jenkins or like Heroku or one of the other platforms, where you don't have to do all this like configuration. You can basically just in like one YAML file, you define like the steps of your pipeline, and you can get up and running pretty quick. And there's really solid documentation with CircleCI. And I was also like, if you have errors, their error messages are pretty solid. So in a pretty quick turnaround, you can get up and running with both of these technologies. And the coolest part is that, if you're new to cloud operations or cloud technologies, like you get a sense of like best practices, and you also get a sense of just like how to leverage a lot of this stuff without a lot of the overhead. Like at Capital One, Jenkins was like my first kind of official introduction to cloud deployments, because in my government contracting job, everything was on-prem. The company served about 20,000 people. So we had a fairly robust, customer base or whatever you want to call it. But like we had a data center, we had everything. So the idea of a cloud thing was totally new to me. And so it took me, I would say probably about a year really to get to the point where I felt proficient in Jenkins. And with CircleCI, it took me like maybe like a month. Like it was crazy. Like it's just so like, it's just very easy to get into, and it really is. It's just a great platform to learn on.
Yeah, we've done some episodes on Firebase, and we'll put the links to those in the show notes. But generally, it was more around the database API technology and AngularFire.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw in the Google Doc, I actually did another post recently for Angular in Depth using AngularFire. I was doing exactly that. I was leveraging their database and showing how easy it was to integrate their cloud functions basically into your code base by just using the objects they give you. Like they have an authentication object, they have a file object that you use the file store. And it's like you don't have to wrap all these in like HTTP calls or like create like a service or something. You can just directly use the AngularFire library, which is really cool.
Nice. We'll have to link that up as well.
Yeah, I think I gave you a link in the Google Doc so sorry, let me cut you off.
No, it's all good. Yeah, we'll pull it out of the Google Doc, make sure people can find it. The thing that I get into with this, and this is something we really don't talk about a lot on the show, is the DevOps end of things, where, at this point, you do the commit, CircleCI picks it up, and then it just gets pushed to Firebase.
Right.
And yeah, I love just the automatic feel of that. I mean, I've used Netlify before, and it's the same kind of thing there, right? Where it builds my static site and then pushes it up. And yeah, and then I don't have to worry about the ops team screwing up my app, or I don't have to go beg anybody to put the library on there I need for the back end system. It just kind of just does its thing.
Yeah, I mean that's the like coolest part about Firebase, and really it's neat because they've using their CLI, you can do all of that. You don't even need like CircleCI. The advantage of having integrating CircleCI is you can have all the other things that you would normally have with a pipeline to include, your end-to-end tests and your unit tests and like any type of like if you need to like keep some kind of track of the commit history and that kind of stuff, you can add those like steps. They allow you to build the stages in the pipeline so that you can just run all of this as a literally, like you said, as soon as you make a commit, it kicks off and you're ready to go.
Yeah. So in terms of, I don't know, like maybe large or like a bigger scale workflow for deployment, have you got the chance to like test one of those? Because this is where I think Jenkins shines if you invest the time to learn all the different stuff you need to learn in Jenkins. But when you have like more complicated workflows, so have you had the chance to like test, I don't know, like a longer workflow or something like that?
Yeah. So I haven't really gotten to do most of the stuff I've done with CircleCI has been like kind of one-off type things where it's like a small app. I actually just linked a weather app in the Google Doc if you wanted to check it out that I'm working on right now that uses NGRX. It's kind of started as actually the basis for another blog post I'm doing for Capital One's blog. And then I just kind of ran with it because I was having fun and I built it out to be a little bit more robust. And that one actually is like what I would consider like a full featured, pipeline. And I'm building in tests and I'm treating it like an actual project versus just like a toy project. But in terms of like larger workflows, the most of my experience has been with Jenkins because that's what we use at Capital One. And I've been on a team that we supported an app that like we had to do regular deployments and we had a lot of different compliance guidelines with the tests that we had. And then like any types of, we have like alerts and we're using AWS. So it was utilizing a lot of different pieces of AWS infrastructure to include like Lambdas and notifications and that kind of stuff. But the experience that I've had with that is I think you're right. Jenkins definitely like I think kind of owns a lot of the market for that. But I would argue that the ease at which you can use CircleCI makes it definitely like a competitor. And I think that most of the people I've talked to said that I think the adoption problem with CircleCI is just the license fees. Because I think that I've heard and I haven't actually, like I said, I've only done small projects, so I've never had to do it as like a full on business. But I've heard that both their license fees are expensive, but I've also heard their license fees are fairly reasonable. So I think it depends on your use case, where you're coming from, and what you're trying to accomplish with the pipeline.
Well, and I'll also chime in. I've set up Jenkins within within companies I worked at, and that's not always fun either.
Well, and the worst part is that like a lot of times with Jenkins, things will fail, and it just won't be readily apparent. Like you'll just get like you would have. We at Capital One, we have like a pre-configured library of like Groovy scripts that we can rely on. And a lot of those are built out pretty well. They're pretty solid. You use them understanding that what it's going to look like if it's going to error. But there have been, several times where it was, it would be a couple of days we were trying to debug something and we just, either you can't recreate it or when you do recreate it, it just shuts off. Like the node doesn't work or the we had a lot of problems with we have an agent that we use for authentication, and one of the agent we were using it basically it's supposed to operate one way in the pipeline, it operates a different way. And so it's like that kind of thing is just and that's where I would say that CircleCI definitely has a strength, because just every time I've had a problem, it's just really easy to understand. Even like I had a problem with SAS the other day, and it gave me like specifically like where the problem was occurring, and using the console output, I was able to backtrack it to debug where it was in the project. I think that's where you'll see CircleCI maybe become more popular like in the future, but you never know. So.
Okay, so in terms of motivations to let's take a few step back for a second and talk about like, okay, so we want to do CI/CD, which means continuous integration or continuous delivery or deployment, which basically means that when we push code to like the main repository, it goes off and automatically runs all the tests, and then if everything is okay, it deploys the application. So one thing that like when people are getting into that and transitioning into doing CD is questions of like they ask questions like, what about rollbacks? What about, automatically, if there is a problem, I want to go back to the, last version and all that stuff. How do you find that with like Circle and Firebase and such?
Oh yeah. So in Circle, it's really cool because you can you basically just configure the job. Like you connect the job to your repo, and then it has like you can define how like all those behaviors you're just talking about. Like in the case of rollback, what it would look like if you want to always come back to that one version or that kind of thing. And when you compare that to Jenkins, it's a little bit more painful because then you're having to like determine like the stack that it's on, and like you have to like it's just a lot more manual stuff, and I think CircleCI is kind of cool because it does, you have one screen you can use, whereas like with Jenkins, we use CloudBees, so like you have like the little console and all the different stuff, but then that also has to line up with the scripts that you're running, and it's just I've just always kind of it's always been a little bit more of a challenge.
Yeah, I agree. It sounds cool that they have everything in one place. It used to be much harder than that.
Right, exactly.
I have a quick question on the deployment. So you can deploy, like you said, from the Firebase CLI. Do you just run the Firebase CLI in CircleCI to deploy, or does it have some other way of doing it?
Yeah, that's all you're really doing. So basically, you have to include a token. Like you generate a token with the Firebase CLI, and then you store it as an environment variable. And then when you run your CircleCI job, you have typically you'll have a build and you'll have a deploy. The build job is exactly what you're thinking. It goes out, it builds your code, it runs any tests you have, it caches any of the resources. Then you take the bundle that you've got. I'm talking about like an Angular app, but you take up your bundle and then you uncache it in the next job, which is the deploy job. And then what that does is you install Firebase, and then you go, because it's all done in a Docker container, but you install Firebase and then you run the CLI, and the CLI will pick up that token that I was talking about. And it's actually even cooler because it used to be that you had to manually specify to pass that in as a parameter. And now you just literally call Firebase deploy, and then it does all the magic for you. Because you used to have to say like Firebase deploy, -- token, whatever, and then give it your environment name, or your variable name. But yeah, that's pretty much all it does. And then when it finishes, it outputs your the link that you'll have for your hosting or your DNS name or wherever you put your app.
That makes sense. So the other question I have then is, what is your use case on this? What are you building or doing to get this up on Firebase? Because it sounds like Firebase isn't the stack, and you mentioned Jenkins already, CircleCI, neither of them are really the stack that they're using at Capital One.
Well, at Capital One, we're using Jenkins. We're using Jenkins CloudBees. So like we've basically got a bunch of Terraform scripts that are that are called from a set of Groovy scripts, and we have an automated setup that we're relying on, and there are a couple teams that are using CircleCI, but it's still like kind of in that like early adopter phase where they're not, everybody else is basically using Jenkins. The CircleCI, the use case for me, like what I'm working on, is basically like, for one thing, it's learning, because it's nice because you get that experience with the pipeline, so you understand like you need to run your tests in the pipeline. You need to test like dependencies, or you might even like want to store the code coverage results from your unit tests. you learn that kind of stuff, but you also are able to build that up without having all of the infrastructure that you would normally need with like Jenkins. I don't need running instances of Jenkins to be able to do this. I can just integrate as soon as I connect CircleCI to my GitHub repo, they share SSH tokens, and whenever the commits occur, it immediately. I mean, you can specify this behavior, but by default, it'll immediately kick off a build job. And so, as far as like my use case, what I'm doing is learning, and then I'm also like anything that I do that is on my own. Like open source work. Like I mentioned, there's a side project I'm working on with one of my colleagues. I'm not using it for like enterprise level stuff because I'm not an enterprise. I'm just like an individual, developer. But I could see a case where, you have a bigger company that does use CircleCI. And if you look at their site, they have a lot of information about big companies that have adopted them. I don't know them off the top of my head, but I think there is a case to use it for that. I'm just not doing that, or at least that's not been my experience.
So it's your personal stuff. It's not stuff at Capital One.
Right.
Do Capital One know about your side project, or you just exposed yourself and your friend?
Oh, that's it. I'm done. No. Yeah. There's like all kinds of different rules that govern this kind of thing. And I'm within all of the compliance rules and whatnot, but this is to completely like private enterprise, completely like my own thing. And it's totally fine.
Nice. Can I have 50% of your?
Well, as soon as I start making money, I'll come back and talk to you. But apparently, it's taking money from me. So yeah.
Just transfer it. I will give you the bank details.
Okay. Yeah.
So you're using it for cyber, which is cool. I've been using Firebase for a lot of things, mostly like, POC. In the start, it was POC, but I'm not a real like server guy. So it's fun to have something that take care of that side for you. And you can, like all the like scaling stuff and, security and all that stuff that you still need to configure, but it's much easier than to just learn everything and, be constantly afraid that you're doing something wrong.
Right. Yeah. And that was the great part for me, because like with, my experience, it had always been like you said, like I wasn't the server guy, but I was on the server team. So it was like, I was familiar with like what was happening, but it was like, I wasn't, at the end of the day, it wasn't my neck if something broke. Right. So the whole thing was like, if I was going to do stuff like on my own or just to learn, I was kind of struggling at first. And like what has happened is that it really gives you room to play, and it gives you room to play in a way that like you can take those skills to a bigger enterprise, but like you don't have to have all of that stuff. Like it allows you a lot of like automation and it really kind of takes care of you in a way. But what I would say was what I've been really impressed with is I thought the same thing. The first couple of projects I did with Firebase, like I was like, oh, this is kind of like a toy platform. I don't think this is going to be really for real. And honestly, it is. Like it's amazing. Like the authentication module is like, they even have like a built-in. If you wanted to, they have a GUI that they create like for Google accounts. So all you have to do is call it. It's a whole dialogue, and it'll authenticate your people, and like you can intercept that authentication, and you can use that for. I have a personal blog called rhythmandbinary.com. It's in the Google Doc that you guys asked me to fill out. I wrote a whole article about that because like you can secure like your database instance based on the UID of your person, which is like basically dynamically generated. But what it does is it secures it so that only that person can look at that data. So it's awesome. Like and they have a lot of stuff like that where they have like data redundancy and like multi-layers of, like you said, like you can scale if you want, like your instances. And I haven't even touched like a lot of the analytics stuff. And like, that's my next like thing I was going to try to play with. And you get into like being able to spin up stuff that's actually using Google Analytics, which is kind of cool.
Need to create a complex enterprise Angular application? Angular Bootcamp is an intensive 3-day workshop class to learn the basics of Angular through sophisticated techniques for real-world applications. We target Angular 6 and the recent versions, with much of the curriculum is suitable back to Angular 2 Or go beyond the 3-day class with a consultation or project launch with Oasis Digital, the team behind Angular Bootcamp. We can assist your team or launch your project with advanced Angular topics including scalability, data flow, state management, full stack product design, and more. Contact us for a private class at your location or buy a ticket for public classes in various cities around the U.S. and occasionally in Europe. Online live instructor training is also available at angularbootcamp.com.
Joe, why are you so
Yes.
quiet?
Shy, you know me. I'm always quiet.
Lurking in the dark, waiting to ask the right question.
I think one, it's a little bit hard to kind of like get a grasp because everybody talks about CircleCI and how amazing it is. But then you actually like need to kind of go do it. I've done a little tiny bit with CircleCI, and I do think that their onboarding is pretty easy. But it also sounds to me, Andrew, like you really have a big preference for it over Jenkins.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah. If I could convince the folks at Capital One to use it, that would be, yeah. I mean, because it just like, I mean, I like I told you, I mean, I've spent hours working on Jenkins, or no, days working on like Jenkins, like build jobs that fail.
Mm-hmm.
And then the worst part is that a lot of times it happens, you know, like you'll do like a nighttime deployment. So you're sitting there on the call with like 10 people and like, you know, it's at like 11 o'clock and you start working on it. And then along about 2 o'clock, you realize that the problem you've been trying to figure out, you're just not going to figure out. And so then you have to, you know, roll everything back. And then you spend like the whole like next like week basically playing with Docker containers and like dev environments, trying to figure out why, you know, this stuff doesn't happen. And half the time it's just because, you know, I mean, it was really bad. One time I think we misspelled something and we didn't realize until like the very end that it was trying to call something and it couldn't find it. But it was like stuff like that's just such a pain. So I'm a big evangelizer, I guess you could call it, for CircleCI.
So one of the kind of impressions that I've got from CircleCI is that it's great for like small projects because it's quick and, you know, kind of automatic a bit, right? But what about for like these big, huge projects? You sort of seem to sound like you think it's great for even the really, really big, large enterprise scale stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like, I wish that I could really have like some experience. Like I told you, you know, I know that there's been some folks at Capital One that are like, you know, playing with some of this stuff, and I think they're even using it for some small things. But like, I just haven't really had that high level experience. And the feeling that I get is that it could take, I guess, the bandwidth for that. Like, I think it could support that. I just like I haven't had that experience yet, you know. So, but I get the impression that they've got, you know, the infrastructure to support it, and I think it would be a good experience. Gotcha.
CircleCI also has like a ton of like integrations with other services, right?
Right.
So what are the specific ones that you've tried?
So the majority of the stuff, like I told you, was really just revolved around these like little projects that I'm working on. So I haven't really I've got it working with Firebase. I got it working with AWS. I've got it doing I tried. Well, actually, I didn't go all the way through with this, but this company that Jenkins bought, Ship. I tried that. Well, I got ready to try that, and I gave up on that one because I ended up not needing what I was trying to do. But yeah, the thing that I was actually kind of impressed with was one of my friends that is working on an Android app. He was able to automate like a basically deployment for the app, and you can use it to sideload the like early versions of his application, and he's actually able to use CircleCI to do that whole process where they like deploy it to when it finishes. I think my understanding is it actually exposes a link. And then on your Android device, you can go to the link and then it'll automatically load the app onto your device, you know, instead of actually having to go through like the store and all that kind of stuff. But that's built in. Like you can integrate that. I just haven't had the experience with it. And that's actually another project that I would like to play with that I haven't quite got to yet.
Gotcha.
So have you done deployments like this to other systems like, I don't know, AWS or to a virtual private server or?
Yeah, I've done it to AWS. So I did one that was using a CloudFront distribution, and it pushed out basically like my bundle into a S3 bucket that was then exposed via CloudFront and Route 53. And that was also very straightforward. Like they have really good documentation. So and then the other cool part is that because a lot of people are talking about it, there's a lot of like pretty solid like blog posts that are available that kind of walk through. Like there's one of the things that I would like to play with is using ECS, and that there's a lot of talk about that. And I think they actually have a full page where they explain like how to really get that running. And that's the container service, which is like basically they're like Docker. I wouldn't really call it Docker Hub, but like it's basically the way they're running containers in the cloud, and then you can deploy them with AWS's infrastructure between like an ALB or an ELB, and that's all built in, which is kind of cool.
What were those two acronyms?
Oh, the application load balancer and then the elastic load balancer. Application load balancer works with like your ECS, and the elastic load balancer is like it's kind of hard to like really explain this without a diagram, I guess. But like it's basically like, you have like one container to one instance, whereas like an ALB is it will allow you to scale multiple instances within the same multiple containers in the same instance, because everything is about like Dockerizing like your application. So you would have like with the elastic load balancer, you would have one Docker container and you'd have one EC2 instance, and then they would be, and it's very kind of manual, I guess. And then the application load balancer is more where you would have you could have multiple Docker containers running with your app scaled into like one EC2 instance, and then so it's supposedly theoretically like cheaper, I guess. And there's been a lot of stuff. AWS has done some work with like Capital One, and we've kind of leveraged some of this technology. But the whole idea is you're using less cloud resources to accomplish the same goal.
For me, the idea of this kind of continuous deployment I just love having stuff be automatic. So I don't have to think about it.
It's so cool. Like, I mean, I get like, it's funny because my wife makes fun of me, but like, I have this thing where I set the alert so it'll email me when the deployment's finished. So like, like I could just, it's just so exciting. I don't know. Like you just do that commit, and then like 10 minutes later, hopefully not 10 minutes later, but like you get this little email, and it's like, oh, everything's successful, and it's just like, it's magic, and everything's running. Your app is good. Everything is up there.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And I guess like, you always have this kind of thought. I mean, my experience prior to all of this had always been, I worked with a bunch of old guys that managed this data center. And if you wanted a server, like it was like they had to go procure it. They had to go build it. They had to go, hook it up. It was this huge pain. And it's just like thinking about, I think that's why I get so excited about it, because it's like, I think about all of that struggle. It was all done for me with this like one button, and it's cheap. You don't have to pay for all the stuff that you would otherwise.
Yeah, that provisioning and setting up and all that stuff, that was my job when I was in college. So
yeah, I mean, like, part of me kind of like misses like some of the like the physicality of everything, like, being able to like actually touch the server. Sometimes I'm like, I kind of miss that, but I don't know. I don't miss like having to, install patches and walk through like trying to upgrade like components and whatever else you might have to do.
Yep, absolutely. And it's funny too, just, thinking about the evolution there. So when I started working on that particular team at the university, yeah, we'd go in with, basically a box full of CDs. And then we got fancy and we got PXE boot, which was essentially you would boot the install disk over the network, right? But you were still sitting at a physical server. And then
right. I remember, we did that too. I remember that.
Yep. And then they got real fancy and they bought VMware ESX, and then we could deploy from an image sitting at our desk, right? So then I wasn't up at the data center every day.
Yeah. I had a funny story. I remember one time we had admins that were kind of like divas over a lot of these devices, and like I was testing in my old job. We had bought this like software system, and like it required, I think, like 16 cores to run or something like that, and they only allocated me like 2 cores. I was like, well, and it was really slow, and I was like, well, this is I'm pretty sure this is why it's really slow. Like you're not allowing us to do this stuff, and I had to like go into this whole thing, and the guy yelled at me and got like super upset about like allocating extra cores, and he claimed all this like ridiculous stuff about how like it would mess up everything else because they had the same thing. They had VMware, and he was like, it's gonna ruin all this stuff. It's gonna mess up with the resources. And finally, I got up high enough in the chain where the management, sided with me, and then we were able to kind of override this guy, and then everything was fine. And I never heard from him again. And it was like, but it's like that kind of stuff is just crazy, because and now, especially in the world of the cloud, it's like, we have those resources, and it's like, you don't have to worry about that. And if it goes down, there's a redundant system right behind it, which is just makes it kind of magical.
Yep, absolutely. Well, and yeah, you get something like Firebase, and you don't have to think about any of that stuff.
Right. I mean, and that's the crazy part. And then you mean, the free part is also the cool part with this. And I think that's kind of one of, Firebase's strong suits, is just that they're really allowing a lot of people, access. And there's not this like barrier to entry where you have to buy all this stuff, or you have to have accounts and whatever.
Yep.
Now, what about getting started and learning how to utilize it in your project? Where did you start with that?
Well, so when I was talking to the guys at work, they were more talking about like the NoSQL database. That was like the big thing that I had heard about, because it's like crazy fast. Like, because they use like I think it's called bidirectional. So I forgot the name. It's in the post that I've got. I actually, because I talked to on Angular in Depth, a couple of the people actually work on the teams that are supporting Firebase. And I was able to like actually get in touch with some of those guys and talked about how that kind of works under the covers. But basically it's like streams, and it's like remote state management, where, you basically, as soon as you create these observables that connect to the instances of the database, then as soon as you want to like if you push like a change, when it hits Firebase, it pushes that change to anything that's connected to it. So like the idea would be, I guess, like if you had a mobile app, and you had a bunch of different people on their phones, and one person like pushes an update, all of them are going to receive it. That was kind of like what I was more interested in at first. But then when I got into the hosting part of it, then I mean that like kind of had me set, because with the hosting part, you can host an Angular app. And it's really cool because normally you have like a front end and a back end, and typically you'll have like a front end project and a back end project. And it's kind of a pain because you have to deploy one to be able to connect to the other, or if you're lucky, you can, wrap them together somehow. But like with this, because you have like the AngularFire library and even the cloud functions, all you have to do is write your front end app, and you've got one code base that basically serves everything. And you're able to use like I said, like the database, you're able to use file storage, authentication, all the stuff that we've been talking about. And it's cool because you don't have to maintain a backend. And you could really get like into it and create like a full backend that does all that stuff and orchestrates a lot of these things. You can also just directly do that in your front end application and just create like a service that basically wraps all those calls for you. That's been a lot of like where I've really enjoyed using it, and that's where like I think that's probably where I spent the most time. But it's pretty cool.
So I'm also curious then. I mean, you're deploying an Angular app, but I wonder do you think this would work just as well for React or Vue or some other front end system that people are using?
Yeah, so I would need to like definitely get back to you on that, because like that I've like been like pure Angular. Like the stuff I do at Capital One is Angular, the stuff I do on my own is Angular, and then I haven't really like dove into actually trying to deploy one of these other frameworks. But I will say that the process of doing this, it definitely recognizes like the bundle. So I think the whole thing is that if you can bundle your JavaScript application in a way that can be like, you can host it somewhere and then a browser can hit it and then run with it. Like I'm talking about like something like GitHub Pages or like an S3 bucket or something like that. I'm pretty sure Firebase probably could support it, because the experience that I've had was that it, for the hosting, it's basically like literally like deploying like a bundle into a bucket. And so the only problem that I really had with this was I tried doing a Node.js backend, and or Node Express, sorry, backend. And what happened was I found out that they actually only support static pages for Node. Now this might be going to change and whatever else, but as far as I understand, it's just using basically your old school static web pages and whatever. And so that was kind of a little bit of a pain, because I'm sitting there and I'm like, I can just build out this backend. However, if you look at the Firebase functions, you realize that is the backend. You can hack I wouldn't say hack. You can create Firebase functions that actually do HTTP calls and serve the same purpose. So even if you want to go out to external APIs. So it's they kind of build that in. I would say that I don't know for sure. I would suppose that you probably could do that. I can't, because just on all the experience that I've seen with what I've worked on.
Makes sense to me.
Because I can't imagine it would work any other way, right? How would they be able to tell that it's an Angular app? I guess you could look in the code base and you could see that you could look at the way it's been packed or something, but I can't imagine that they would just limit that.
Yeah, you build it down to the same essential thing, and then
exactly. I think that's the way that their technology works.
Cool. Joe and Shai, do you have anything else you want to ask or add?
I have an unrelated question. Why have you decided to move your blog from your blog to Medium?
What do you mean?
You started writing on Medium, right? Recently.
No. I started working on WordPress. So the whole thing was that I was learning so much stuff when I first started at Capital One that I was trying to find a way to document what I was learning in a way that I would actually use. Because if you're anything like me, you create notes and whatever, but then that always ends up in some folder somewhere, and then you forget about it, and then it takes forever to find it. Whereas if you do a blog post, it's it's intentional. You have to repeat and teach, what you've done, and then as soon as you're done, you have it in this perfectly indexed place. You can go back and WordPress, for example, you just go do the search. All the blog platforms do that. But so that's how I started, and I didn't get into Medium until the Angular in-depth work, because I was perfectly happy on WordPress. The thing was, though, the reason that I will say that I really enjoy Medium, and what I've started doing is there's actually a plugin that allows you to convert your WordPress posts into Medium. So now if I do a post on my personal blog, a lot of times I'll cross post or whatever you call it. So I'll actually post it as just on my personal Medium account. So it's whatever, medium.com/Andrew Evans. But the whole thing is that Medium is really nice because you can track. It's very easy to track people, and it's very easy to publicize things. And honestly, there's a lot of kind of flows that I guess it just seems to be more I hate to say the word, but pretty, I guess, more, it's more attractive than WordPress. I think you can make it attractive, and you can do theming and whatever else. But I've enjoyed WordPress. I support WordPress. I like WordPress a lot. But Medium it's just a lot. It's just cooler, I guess, in a way. But it's also there's so many people on Medium doing things. It's very easy to get integrated into it and be part of the community that's doing it. And for me, a lot of the blogging that I do, half of it is for myself, but half of it is for the community. One of the things that I love about being an engineer is just that is just learning. And one of the best ways to learn is through collaboration. My favorite part of being in college was always just the conversation we would have in the classroom. It wasn't I hated tests, I didn't want to do these projects, whatever else, but it's just listening to what people were learning, and then what their perspective was. I enjoyed that. And that's why I'm on Medium now, but I'm still on WordPress.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, Angular in-depth is also on Medium, and I think that's
right.
What you're seeing here.
Yeah, and that's actually that's how it all started, because as soon as I did this post, then I was oh, look at all these things, because I read Medium articles, but I hadn't really done a lot of posting, and now it's I've been trying to be a little bit more intentional about that.
This episode is brought to you by Triplebyte. Applying to programming jobs sucks. You have to put the right keywords in your resume. You spend hours and hours on the phone screens and take-home projects, and that's assuming the company even responds to your application. Well, if you're a software engineer, Triplebyte can help. They work with over 400 top tech companies, from big names like Dropbox and Adobe to exciting startups. You do one brief online interview with them, and if you do well, you go straight to final interviews with the company on their platform. It's like the Common App for software developers. Triplebyte does not look at your resume or where you went to school. All they care about is if you can code. I've helped dozens of software developers with various credentials get jobs, and this looks like a terrific way for you to get in and get interviewed and get a job without a lot of the hassle and overhead. You can go check them out at triplebyte.com/angular. That's triplebyte.com, byte as in 8 bits. As a special offer for listeners of this show, if you take a job through Triplebyte, they'll offer you a $1,000 signing bonus. Well, anything else we want to jump on before picks?
No, I'm good.
Me too.
All right. Shai, do you want to do some picks for us then?
No. Just kidding. So my pick for this episode is the book Exploring JS, which is a great book. And so this is my pick. And I had another one, which is a YouTube video that teaches you about algorithms. So I will link to that in the show notes to anyone who is interested in that. That's it.
Cool.
All right, Joe, what are your picks?
I think I just got one pick this week. Same thing I picked on the other show. Went and saw the movie Alita Battle Angel, and I super loved it. So if you're looking for a movie to go to, I would highly recommend that. If you've listened to this right after publication, if not, it'll probably be on video. But I really thought it was a great movie. I thought it was super fun and just had a fun story to watch. But that's it. That's my pick.
Awesome. I'm going to jump in here with a quick pick or two. First of all, I swear I'm picking books like every other week, but I probably listen to a book a week. Anyway, it's just kind of the way I roll. The book that I've been listening to lately, I've really been enjoying. It's called The Effective Executive. I highly, highly recommend it to everybody. It is kind of focused on top tier management in businesses, and it talks about effectiveness and productivity and things like that. But it's really great. And if you're trying to be more productive in general, it's a terrific book. It was recommended on the JavaScript Jabber episode we did with Manny Vea, who's a friend of mine. And we had a long conversation about how to be more productive as software developers. So definitely check that out as well. He recommended a few other books, and he's actually summarized the top 50 books on productivity, and you can get that as a course from him. So I'll put links to all that stuff in the show notes. But yeah, really been digging that. And then the other thing that I've been working on is...
Wait. Hold on. The top 50 books on productivity, like 50?
50.
It kind of sounds like what you need is the advice that if you want to be productive, don't spend your time reading 50 books.
Yeah, well, he wanted to understand it, and he summarized it all so you don't have to.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
So, yeah. That's why I invited him on the podcast in the first place. So anyway, but yeah, that was terrific. So definitely check that out. And then, the other thing I've been doing is just documenting the processes around the podcast production and sponsors and all that stuff. It's really been a powerful thing because once I have it documented, most of the stuff I wind up being able to hand off to my team, and they take care of a ton of it for me. One book that I read about that recently is the Checklist Manifesto. I don't know if I picked that on this show. I should definitely shout that out. I read that last week. So it was terrific. And it's been nice to be able to just say, look, this is how we do things, and then get it done. And it's also been nice because my team has given me feedback on some of it when they try it, or if it's a checklist on something that they've been taking care of in one way or another for me. It's like, oh, well, you also needed to add this, or, I think you could do this better, or we could automate this piece or whatever. So anyway, really, really digging that. So those are my picks. Andrew, do you have some picks for us?
Yeah, I have been listening to a book on tape by Andy Weir. He's the guy that wrote The Martian. It's called Artemis, and I highly recommend it. It's really cool. It's got Rosario Dawson as the voice, so it's kind of cool because you can kind of picture her in the role. It's basically about like a smuggler that lives on the moon, and there's like a whole lot of stuff that happens. It's very exciting. And so I would definitely recommend that. And then I guess I would kind of put a shout out for Traversy Media. I use a lot of the older videos that he has on YouTube just for some remedial stuff, and it's solid. And I think he probably doesn't get a lot of attention, or he doesn't get it. Maybe he does get a lot of attention, but I want to give him more attention, I guess is what I should say. So yeah, those would be my two picks.
Nice. I read Artemis, but I didn't like it quite as much as The Martian. I did enjoy it, so it's definitely worth picking up, but I thought The Martian was a better book.
Yeah, I totally can see what you're saying because I just feel like the Martian, like you kind of had that like feeling of like you were like behind him the whole time, and I think on Artemis they're always kind of bad. So, but that's also kind of cool. So, like, I don't know. I'm kind of I haven't finished it yet, so I'll have to let you know after I finish what I really think.
Nice. Well, if people want to find you online, Andrew, where do they go?
Well, you can check out rhythmandbinary.com, or you can follow me on, Andrew Evans 02 is my GitHub. I just got a Twitter handle. I think it's, hang on, I think it's Andrew Evans 0102. Is that right? There's Andrew Evans is like such a generic name. It's crazy. Like half the time I have to like add a number, behind me. Yeah, I was gonna say check out rhythmandbinary.com and that's definitely because that has links to my LinkedIn, my resume, a bunch of other stuff. So
awesome, and we have those links also in the Google Docs, so we'll get those posted into the show notes.
Oh, awesome.
All right. Well, thank you, Andrew, and thank you to our panel. We'll go ahead and wrap this up, and we will be back next week.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the conversation, and think you guys do an awesome job with your podcast.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, and see you all next week.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CACHEFLY.com to learn more.